Hello Christian family, and welcome to our series of videos on how to build a relationship of intimacy with Christ. My name is Erick Kabongo, and my goal is to get you just a little bit closer to God than you are right now by sharing secrets and truths that I came to discover in building my own relationship of intimacy with Christ. So this week we're going to be looking at the topic of intimacy and pain, intimacy and suffering. A lot of us sometimes ask ourselves, I'm serving God, I'm doing all these things that you've been suggesting in all your videos on how to build a relationship of intimacy with God, but why am I still suffering? Why am I still going through so much pain? Where is God when I'm going through all these hard times? Why is He not intervening in my life? If God truly loves me, why am I going through pain? Why am I going through suffering? That's what we're going to be looking at. Before we get into it, make sure you click the subscribe button so that you don't miss any of our updates on our upcoming videos, and you also catch up on videos that we've already shot on this series on how to build a relationship of intimacy with Christ. A lot of people ask themselves, I serve God, I do a lot of things for God, I sacrifice a lot, I abstain from sin, but why is it like I'm suffering? Why is it like I go through the most atrocious and the most painful experiences in my life? If you are amongst people who often experience such things, I would like to tell you that you're not alone. I remember at some point in my life, I also experienced the same. 6 years ago, I found myself jobless. I was only 19 at the time, and I didn't have any qualifications. Everywhere I went, I was very timely, and they told me that they couldn't employ me. That means I had to rely on other people who were working. I had to beg people so that they could allow me to even sleep on the floor, just because I didn't have any money. I felt abandoned by my family, and I remember there was this brother of mine from my church. At the time I was praying with the end time message believers, and he was a very close brother of mine. We used to go to church together with, and I asked him if he could allow me to stay with him. At first he said yes. We lived in a house of 10 people, and all the other people moved out because they got married, and we were only left the two of us. The house was too big and too expensive to pay, and I didn't have any job. So I tried all I could to ask him if he could stay with me. But then somehow I felt like he wasn't willing to allow me to stay with him, and eventually he told me his brother was coming from back home and he had to go and live with him. I remember this day I sat in the living room. I asked God the same question that many of us would ask when we find ourselves in a very painful situation. I cried and I said, God, why? I serve you. I could also go out there and do all these things that young people do, but I sit here, I serve you, God. I don't have a job, I can't afford paying rent. Where are you? Where are you, God? I ask myself, why am I suffering if I'm serving you? If you say you love me, God, why am I suffering? And I'm sure you might also be asking yourself the same question. At the time, I didn't really understand why I was serving God with all my heart, with integrity, but I was suffering. I was the poorest. People used to laugh at me. Some even told me, you should go back home. I even started thinking of going back to Congo. It's only now that I realized that there are three things I learned that are often reasons why we suffer even if we serve God. The first one is our own choices and decisions. This is depicted in Genesis chapter 3, where we see Eve making a decision to disobey God, and that decision bringing a lot of pain and chaos, making them realize that they made one of the biggest mistakes. I can imagine Eve sitting there and asking herself, why did I even bother to listen to the devil in the first place? Why did I even allow myself to make this mistake? And I know a lot of us have made a lot of mistakes in our lives through the decisions that we made. Sometimes we are sitting and asking ourselves, I shouldn't have listened to that friend's advice. I shouldn't have made this decision, because look at my life today. I'm finding myself suffering just because I listened, or I made this mistake, or I made this bad decision in my life. The second reason why I discovered that we suffer even though we serve God is because God creates suffering in our life. It is very shocking, isn't it? This is depicted in a story of a blind man who was sitting on the side of the road. Jesus' disciples asked him, why is he born blind? Is it because of his sins or the sins of his parents? And Jesus looked at them and said, it's not because of his sins or the sins of his parents, but it is because the glory of God had to be manifested in the life of this gentleman. And when we read Isaiah chapter 45, the Bible says that God creates evil, God creates sufferings, and God creates some of the circumstances that happen in our life. Many of us are born with some diseases, we are born with some conditions, we have experienced certain things in our childhood that are haunting us today, and sometimes we sit and ask ourselves, why? I can imagine the blind man. He might have said for his entire life and wondered, why was I born blind? Why is it that God allowed that I should be born blind? Is there something I did to make God create me the way I am? You might be asking yourself the very same question. You might be going through a lot of pain, a lot of frustration, a lot of anger because of how God created you. And the third reason is that the devil also plays a role in creating sufferings and pain in our life. This is depicted in Mark chapter 5, where there is this man, Legion. And the Bible says that Christ comes to Legion, and the minute Legion sees Christ, by the way, Legion means many. This man was so filled with demons to a point where when he saw Christ, he shouted and said, Jesus, Son of God, what do we have to do with you? His condition had become so reinforced in him to a point where it changed his identity. That's why when Jesus came to him, asked him, what is your name? He said, Legion, because we are many. I just sat there and I wondered, some of us have allowed our suffering and pain to become so pervasive that we've taken the identity of our situation. We've given ourselves names. And what is even funny is that we will try everything to the best of our ability, like Legion, to prevent God from delivering us from the situation in which we are. This man justified his condition because he became so comfortable in his pain and sorrow that he didn't see any need for change anymore. You know the names you call yourself. You know the labels you've given yourself just because your pain and your suffering is everything you can see. You know yourself, what you might be going through, and how that struggle has transformed your identity. Some of the moments when I learned to trust God the most were when I was going through the most painful experiences in my life. And in Matthew 11:28, Jesus says, "Come you all who are weary and burdened, and I shall give you rest." Jesus asks us to do two things: to come, to bring all our pain, to bring our sorrows, our sufferings, regardless of the fact that we might have made mistakes and we might have found ourselves in situations that are creating so much pain in our life. Even if the conditions we have are conditions that we are born with, even if we've allowed the devil to invade our lives and to twist things around to a point where we can identify with nothing but our pain, Jesus is asking us to come. In this relationship that you're going to embark in with me, I'm asking you to come and bring your burden. Bring everything that has been creating pain. And not only that, he is also asking us to learn from him. Now we might ask ourselves, what is it that Jesus is asking us to learn from him? In Gethsemane, he found himself confronted with crucifixion. I can picture him in the same situation that we often also find ourselves. A situation of pain and suffering and sorrow. And what Jesus did was, he asked the Father to strengthen him. And not only that, he also asked God's will to be done. You might be going through this situation, pain and sorrow and suffering. And one thing you will learn is that sometimes pain is one of the most powerful ways through which God teaches us when we are in a relationship of intimacy with him. When we find ourselves in a situation that is painful, in a situation that is complicated, it is an opportunity that God is giving us to trust him. And it is only by trusting him fully that we can be able to appreciate pain and difficult moments and sufferings in our journey with him. That's one of the things I had to learn by going through hardships and difficult times in my life. Thank you so much for watching this week's video. I hope you were blessed by the message. If you liked the video, do not forget to give us a thumbs up, share the video with friends and family, and until next time, God bless you and have fun.